foundational society of Islam during the time of Muhammad and the companions. We are now talking about Islam when it has been translated into state power. Look at this. Look at this around you. Islam was not born under these circumstances. Islam was born in tents, in shacks, in poor circumstances. What has happened, the most significant thing that has happened over the past 14 centuries is that Islam has assumed state power. And here I believe is where the critique lies. The critique, I suppose, that is being advanced by those who are concerned about social justice, including gender justice in Islam, is that in the process of Islam's quest for power, the quest for power has created a privileged political elite that is able to provide us with things like this, the trappings and the institutions of power. But power, as we know, is relational. To be powerful means that you're powerful over someone else. Like poverty and wealth are relational as well. One is never simply objectively poor. You are only poor in relation to someone else. You're only rich in relation to someone else. You're also only powerful in relation to someone else who is less powerful than you. So perhaps the struggle that we are talking about here is the struggle to, on the one hand, empower Muslim society as a whole, but at the same time, in the process of empowering society as a whole, economically, politically, through education, through equal opportunities, prevent those instances where the empowerment of Muslim society also contributes to a corresponding disempowerment of certain groups in Muslim society. And this is where I think the blight or the appeal of Muslim women today come from. I thank Ustaz for pointing out to the history of women's scholarship in Islam, which I believe has been overlooked and forgotten by two principal actors for two different sets of reasons. One, it was forgotten during the colonial period, because in the colonial construction of Islam as a misogynistic, backward religion, the image was constructed that Muslim society has always been hostile to female academia. This is one factor. The other factor is also the rise of male intellectuals in Muslim society that has likewise diminished the role of female scholarship in Islam, in matters that are crucial. And that's why till today, I'm glad this discussion is taking place in ISTAC, which, according to the sign up there, is now the Kuala Lumpur campus of the International Islamic University, because I believe this is where the demand for greater representation and equality comes in. I'm still surprised by how in so many institutions of higher Islamic learning and teaching all over the world, the contribution of female scholarship, Muslim female scholarship, is still left out. And this is true of many Islamic universities and colleges and institutions and think tanks. And I believe this is where I think the need to further this contribution arises. So, to go back to what Farouk said, we are not calling for something that is radically alien to Islam. While I understand Ustaz's concern about feminism as defined by Ustaz, I believe the phenomenon of what we call Islamic feminism maintains its specificity and distinctiveness from that secular Western tradition simply for the reasons that Zai noted at the end. That the Muslim feminists she's talking about are those who are firmly committed to the idea that Islam is a religion of justice and that they are not prepared to accept a clear, complete break between religion and politics. The appeal coming from the sort of activists Zai is talking about is rooted in Islam itself. It's going back to the fundamental texts of Islam in order to articulate a demand for equality today. And note that Muslim feminists are also, the primary targets of critiques coming from people like Geert Wilders, who I mentioned earlier, who argue that there cannot be emancipationists in Islam, and there cannot be emancipation for women in Islam, simply because from their point of view, Islam is fundamentally, essentially hostile to women anyway. So in the same way that Muslim feminists have to deal with critiques coming from conservative Muslims, they also have to deal with critiques coming from hardcore secularists in the West who reject any idea, the notion that there could even be such a thing as Muslim feminism. So therefore, they are really at the cutting edge of what's happening today. So finally, I just want to conclude by trying to locate this debate. Where is it happening? It's happening here in Islam. It's happening at the time when Muslim societies, not all, but many Muslim societies, are established in the form of modern nation states that have constitutions, that have laws. The struggle that we are witnessing is basically a struggle to create a just state, a just system of laws. Nobody is rejecting Islam per se. No one is questioning the sanctity or the sacred status of the Quran. That has never been done. As far as I know, I have never come across a single Muslim feminist who has questioned any of these fundamental essentials of Islam. But what is being struggled for, what is being demanded, is the notion of justice being translated into something that is tangible and real to meet the demands of today. And it is today that this debate has to be conducted. I think I agree with Ustaz, in a civil manner, in a manner that sees this as a common problem affecting all Muslims. Inequality or unjust treatment of Muslim women impacts on Muslim men as well. In many ways, directly and indirectly, in the most roundabout way. As long as the perception of Islam as a patriarchal, misogynistic religion persists, then every Muslim man will always be seen as a misogynist. That's why I get a problem whenever I apply for a visa to go and give a lecture in Australia or America. They all think I'm a terrorist. See, like it or not, we are burdened by this collective burden. It is our burden. It is the burden of the Muslim community. And it is therefore important, incumbent on us to address this together now. But in the context of a current geopolitical climate which is experiencing changes as never before. I take Zai's point about the social revolutions that we are seeing in the Arab world, but put that also in the broader context of a world which is witnessing geopolitical shifts that we have never seen, never anticipated by our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. We will live through a century that will witness the ascendancy of China and India in the world. We will live through a century that will see the end of petrodollar and the hegemony of oil and gas. If all the statistics we have at the moment are correct, then the global map of political Islam will radically change, with the political, social, cultural, and hopefully educational centers of Islam shifting to the east. So it's in this context of uncertainty that I think the demand is being made today. And I'll end with a point that was raised by Ibrahim Musa, the scholar of Deoband, who is now a professor in the United States. Ibrahim Musa once talked about the state of Muslim normative religiosity and political thinking, and he diagnosed the problem as a problem of a community living in a post-imperial age but still using the vocabulary of empire. And the Muslim world today, Muslims, normal Muslims, ordinary Muslims like you and I, have to address the fact that we are living in an extremely complex society whereby many of our settled understandings of politics, society, economics will be radically challenged over the next decade or so. Institutions like this, which are expressions of state power, may lend the impression of solidity and permanence. They are, in a sense, nostalgic because they bring us back to an age of Muslim power, dominant political power. That political dominance, that political power is not going to be with us over the next 20 or 30 years. We are going to watch the world radically change with new centers of power that we never anticipated. And with this happening, everything is literally up in the air. This is both an enormous challenge for Muslims, and at the same time, I think it will impose enormous pressures on Muslims as well. And the conservative voices in Islam, in Muslim society, will have to recognize the fact that because of this shifting political terrain worldwide, ordinary young Muslims today who have more access to the world than ever before, through internet, through the media, through cheap travel, through the massive global communicative infrastructure that we've built, will have access to all sorts of new ideas, other things to inspire them, other models to inspire them. So, in keeping with Ustaz's call for a culture of internal critique based on sincere concern, I think the responsibility also lies upon the conservative elements of Muslim society to recognize that the all-imperial ideology, the all-imperial vocabulary, the vocabulary of power that we had before, that could be used to coerce, to silence alternative voices among Muslims, is simply not going to be there anymore. There's just so many times that you can keep accusing someone of blasphemy or heresy or insulting Islam. After a while, that accusation loses its impact and power. And what it exposes is the desperation of a community that is desperately seeking answers but wants to find safe solutions. I'm not certain whether we will have safe, simple solutions. And the evolution of, the political and social and societal evolution of Muslim women in Muslim society today is a given fact. It's not going to go away. In all the major universities and institutions of higher learning in many Muslim countries, women are actually the majority of the students. That is a given fact. We cannot fall back on nostalgia, on some golden age that may or may not have ever existed, to somehow give you some false sense of comfort that order in this traditional sense can be maintained. So I see this as a productive moment for us to actually address the realities that we are seeing today. A Muslim society that is experiencing changes on an unprecedented scale, which is real, and which will give birth to a modern Muslim society, whether we like it or not. I only hope that in the process of doing so, this culture of antagonism that Zai laments and I share the lament, I hope this culture of antagonism will diminish in time, and that the more conservative voices in Muslim society will recognize that, we are not a community that can be taken out of the mainstream of human history. Nostalgia for the past, for the golden age of the past, might be attractive. It is a panacea. It's a bit like going to a cinema for 2 hours, but afterwards, when the movie is over, you still have to go back into the real world. And the real challenges facing the Muslim world today are economic, political. They deal with matters of sovereignty, which I've just touched upon, and all of this can only be addressed successfully if we have a modern, dynamic Muslim society. And one of the key components of that, of course, is the role that Muslim women have to rightfully play in the modernization of Muslim society as well. So, while I appreciate attempts to discuss this and debate this, I really do not see Muslim feminism as something that is about to fade away or disappear, despite the wishful thinking of some conservatives who may be resistant to change. I think it is a reality. I think it is a progressive start for Muslims today, and all I hope for is that as it evolves and develops, it will also take into account these geopolitical changes that are taking place outside the Muslim community.